America's workforce. Its strength is our nation's success. Join Ronnie Spellman on I Build America podcast as we explore innovative solutions and inspiring stories from leaders and workers shaping America. Discover actionable insights to build a motivated workforce.
Welcome to the I Build America podcast, where we're discussing topics that impact the workforce development around the country. We have with us Dr. Hinojosa. Dr. Hinojosa, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be fun.
So you're a superintendent for the Dallas Independent School District. You're also superintendent out in Georgia, from my understanding. And what's neat for me, everyone loves what you've done across the country. I know that you're one of the most touted superintendents. Dallas has one of the largest school districts in the country. And so your work stands on its own. You've helped prepare kids for graduation and workforce and for college. But tell us about some of what you've done as a superintendent of some of the largest school districts in the country.
Yeah, I've served for 27 years as a superintendent, and 13 in Dallas. And
nice.
I served in 2 of the 100 largest districts in the country.
Wow.
And it wasn't until the end of my career that I figured this out. So you had to have multiple pathways for students.
Right.
Well, we figured out in Dallas, the top quarter, those are our students in advanced placement, international baccalaureate, and magnet schools. Those kids are going to be great in spite of us.
Right.
Because they have great parents and they have great academic rigor. But what we discovered with Dallas College, we created a second quarter called P-Tech, Pathways in Technology, where you get your associate's degree when you're still in high school and you're paired with an industry partner.
Right.
That program has been wildly successful thanks to Dallas College and the Dallas business community. We have 11% of our students graduating from high school with an associate's degree.
Oh, wow.
With industry-based credentials with a partner and like partners for Microsoft, American Airlines.
Wow.
I mean, Accenture needs technology, Bank of America. So all these people were investing in our kids. The only complaint we got about that is from the rest of the kids. They say, what about us? I didn't get into a magnet school. I didn't get into P-Tech. So that's where we created Career Institutes. And we have 4 Career Institutes where you don't have to have a degree, but we get certification in cybersecurity, mechatronics,
right,
aviation, and you don't have to leave your local high school. We created 4 $30 million facilities.
4 $30 million facilities?
4 $30 million facilities where you can get training on how to be a pilot. You can get
nice.
Training on robotics. You can get training on, drones. And so it took us a long time to figure this out, but now we have a pathway for every student. We've sold this fallacy that every kid was going to go to college,
right,
when only 40% of Americans really actually have a bachelor's degree.
Right.
And a lot of people went to college and all they got was debt.
Right.
Right. So you have to be smarter than a 5th grader. You have to figure out how to solve problems for your community. And then I'm very proud of the work that we did in Dallas.
That is incredible. So you're right. 60% of the population, we don't need to leave those behind.
No, we don't.
Yeah, they need jobs and careers and opportunities to take care of their families. And it looks like you've given them so many different industries that they can prepare for through some of the career and technical education programs that you also have. So tell us about some of that and maybe some of the innovation you had. But before that, though, I think this is important because I want people to be able to put Dallas School District in perspective to their own, whether they're in Oklahoma or California or New Jersey. Tell us about the district. How many students? What does the demographics look like? Not just student demographics, but just overall. Buildings, facilities, high schools, number of schools. What does it look like?
Yeah, Dallas. We never apologize for our demographics.
Yeah.
We had Dallas. We had 140,000 students.
Wow.
We were the 15th largest district in the country, but we were the 5th largest city district because a lot of those are county, like Fairfax County, Miami-Dade County. It's New York, Chicago, L.A., Houston, and then us.
Okay.
And so
huge district. Man.
Huge district, but we're also very diverse. We have 5% white students. We have 72% Latinos. We have 21% African Americans. We have 52% English learners.
Wow.
And we never apologize for our demography. We're very proud of our kids, but we also know that we have different needs than some of the middle class families have. So we created partnerships with business and industry. We had low risk and high reward with our businesses. We have over 200 industry partners. And what we told the industry partners to come serve these kids, we can't ask you for money. We're not going to ask you for money. We're just going to ask you for love. And say, love, how does that define? Okay, well, first, love is defined as, first of all, site visits. A lot of our kids never been on an elevator. So they could go out to the Microsoft campus in Irving and see what Microsoft, now they can see the art of the possible. The second thing we asked for is mentorships.
Right.
Then the third thing we asked for was internships, if you so desire. And then the fourth thing is offer them an interview. And if they're not worthy, don't hire them.
Right.
So like that, for 4 years, they get to train our kids. American Airlines says your equipment is terrible. And we said, well, why don't we use your equipment? They said, okay. So they put their equipment in our high schools.
They did.
We have 37 high schools that are, but we have 23 that are comprehensive high schools. And at every high school in Dallas, we have industry partners that are assigned in mostly manufacturing, technology, medical field. And then we also have our own pipeline of future educators that we prepare our students. And I like to call this college, career, and community ready. Wow. Because you have the community piece that gives students agency and opportunity to be successful. And so it's been amazing. Dallas is a can-do city, and we've had all these industry partners that we had nobody say no to us that got in with the program, and they still have all the industry partners that we created about 10 years ago.
So what did your mentorship and internship program look like? Because it seems to me that is an incredible way to get students learning. As you mentioned, when I lived out in California, I was with a group of students that lived near the ocean in California, in LA. And I was surprised that so many of these students in that school district had never been to the beach. Right, much like what you described, they'd never been in an elevator. And it's hard to put that in perspective, but there are a lot of kids that just don't have the exposure. So your mentorship programs and internship programs, I presume, are giving kids an incredible exposure to business.
Let me tell you a very specific story. Let's follow up with American Airlines. Their headquarters here. I had to go beg them 3 times to even have a conversation with us.
Right.
And because of, but then finally they came in and they were all in. Nice. In fact, they ended up hiring, after 4 years, they hired 13 kids straight out of high school with a $60,000, a 401k, and free flights all over the world because they were trilingual. They could speak English, Spanish, and code. And so they changed their hiring practices at American Airlines. You don't have to have a degree to come work for us in a very high-profile job. Right. And for our kids, they got exposed. American Airlines flew them to Florida. Right. They'd never been on an elevator, much less an airplane. And all of a sudden, and here's the other amazing part of this story. Out of all those graduates that we had with an associate's degree, we have 11% of our kids graduate with an associate's degree of our seniors.
That's huge. Yeah.
A third of them failed their 8th grade state exam.
Oh, wow.
So these kids were smart, but they weren't. I'm not proud of my SAT score.
Right.
Some people are good test takers, some people are not. But some people work hard, right. And if they're taught the right stuff, they can figure this out. And so now that was revolutionary that these students were getting these kinds of jobs. And so that's a very specific example of Dallas ISD, Dallas College, right. And American Airlines creating the art of the possible for these students.
No, and that's a really good point, because I think sometimes we might pigeonhole students really early and think that because they pass the achievement exam or whatever measure we have, that they're not going to succeed. But you're right. If you give them some tools and you give them a little love, like you mentioned earlier, then they can do it. They can learn a craft, or they can learn a way to be productive. I mean, and so you're right. You've done something really innovative. I'd love for you to talk more about what you're finding in that realm. Like, don't give up on these kids.
No, that's amazing. We have pilots. 2 of our high schools were teaching kids how to be pilots. And our instructors are one of our former students who was in magnet school, but he went off and became a pilot, but he wanted to be an instructor. Nice. And he was a Latino. And then we had a 51-year-old African-American male who had been the pilot instructor for Delta. Nice. Now he wanted to do something meaningful. So now he's an instructor at one of our schools. Right. And so you got a Latino male and an African-American male being role models. And now these kids getting a lot of, we have, tools and opportunities for students to be successful. We actually even have a dual language HVAC program. Dual language HVAC program where students are literate in 2 languages in an industry that is of high demand, high wage, but not everybody wants to do it.
Right.
But for certain students, this improves their quality of life.
Right.
And so we've been really excited about the support we've gotten and the fact that the community passed a $3.4 billion bond to rebuild all of our schools, and especially those 4 career institutes that cost $30 million each, where these kids are getting all this training.
And you speak of those schools, and that's a huge investment. And we talk about nationally, whether federal government, state government, or even local government, how do you get through all of the policy part of it to get those approved and in place so that it's not taking 20, 30 years to get something on track? Like, how do you do that? And I know you have such a great leadership style, and you were able to get through some of the nuances to achieve those goals. How do you do that? What advice would you give a superintendent across the country on how to get that done?
Well, I learned 2 things. Back in the 1990s that really guided me. I learned I read more business books than I read education books.
Nice.
And there was a management guru named Tom Peters, and he said, incrementalism is innovation's worst enemy.
Right.
That if you just tinker around the edges, our kids need quantum improvement. They don't need continuous improvement.
Right.
So with that mindset, I said nothing was ever bold enough. But then I also in the 90s read from the Harvard Business Review, John Cotter's work about why transformations fail. Transformations fail for 2 reasons. There's not a sense of urgency.
Right.
Well, we have urgency in the hood.
Right.
Urgency for life. And then there's not a guiding coalition that works together to solve the problem.
Gotcha.
Eddie Bernice Johnson, when she was in Congress, God rest her soul, she came and told us that the FAA was desperate. They had no pilots. They had nobody in the pipeline for air traffic control.
Right.
So they came and had a compression planning activity with us, and that's how we designed the programs.
Nice.
Working with government, working with business. I gave you the American Airlines example. Now we have the FAA coming in. And so the compression planning activity we learned from Dallas College about here, we don't get the same thing. We just have to listen about what they need.
Right.
And then we jointly create a program of study. Yes. And then this became so popular in the state of Texas that now they fund these programs at a higher weight.
Nice.
Because if we could pull this off in Dallas with our demographics, what's your excuse?
Right.
And so I think it just created, and now they're very popular in states that used to be only for college, which my boys went to the Ivy Leagues. I'm believing that. But also there's a lot of other kids that need to have these opportunities. And so I think you just need to provide multiple opportunities, and there should be no shame in this game.
Absolutely. How long did it take you to ramp up that FAA program? It didn't take you 20 years to do it.
No, it was like 3 years.
Okay.
I tell people a vision is a dream with a deadline. I said, do you know how old I'm going to be when these pre-K kids graduate? So I don't have that kind of time.
Right.
And I always tell them, and I was telling them a meeting before this, effort is good, results are better.
Yeah.
Everybody tries hard, but if we don't deliver for our kids, they're losing great opportunities.
I agree. And I think sometimes when we look at, as I've traveled across the country, when we look at education, K through 12 education, I think we look at it as a place just for kids to go. We don't really think about it as a place for kids to go to get ready to build a career and to build a way to take care of their families and to build a future. It's not just a babysitting service. At some point, we've got to give them tools that they can use in life, right?
We're the only industry that hadn't reinvented ourselves. Even the cabs had to get reinvented, and they didn't choose to. But like, for example, we have we have a biomedical school on the campus of UT Southwestern, where we're teaching kids who have that acumen early on. We have an international baccalaureate school on the campus on our only HBCU at Paul Quinn College.
Wow.
Because that's for those kids.
Right.
We have 5 Montessori schools that have a waiting list. We have SMU and Toyota has a STEM school in the toughest part of Dallas in West Dallas.
Oh, that's amazing.
So, but see, multiple pathways because students have multiple needs, and and I grew up in Dallas, and I'm an immigrant, and I grew up in this hood, and there's a lot of little Michael Hinojosa waiting for someone to turn them on, and that's what we're trying to do with all of our programs.
Tell me that then. What's your journey? Why did you get into education? So you grew up in Dallas, you said, and an immigrant. Tell us a little more about that. I think that could be an inspiration to people that are looking not only to make a difference in general, but to get workforce, to get an education, and to truly impact the community?
Yeah, well, there were 10 of my family. I was the last one born in Mexico, and I was aimlessly walking the halls of Sunset High School in Oak Cliff here,
right,
when a teacher said, "Look, I want you to apply for this scholarship." I said, "Me?"
Right.
Yeah, she goes, "This scholarship is for future teachers of America."
Oh, wow.
I said, "You think I could be a teacher?" And I love school. I wasn't that good in it, but I loved it. I never missed a day. And so I got it. It was $500. I paid for a couple of books.
Right.
It didn't buy me much other than a dream that I could be an educator.
Right.
And the rest of my life changed. I was a high school basketball player. My coach said, "Hinojosa, you're short, but you're slow too." And I said, "That's very inspirational, coach." He goes, "No, but you're the smartest kid I ever coached, and you work hard."
Yeah.
So if you're hungry, humble, and smart,
yes,
you can figure this out. And so my rest of my career, people tapped me on the shoulder and pushed me.
Nice.
I got my master's degree when I'm my second year to teach. Then I didn't want to be a administrator. I didn't want to be a superintendent, but people kept pushing me.
Nice.
Ended up doing it for 27 years.
And they saw something in you then.
Yeah, that I didn't see in myself.
Yeah.
But
And I speak to people often, like kind of what I mentioned earlier. Sometimes it takes someone tapping us on the shoulder and say, "You can do it." Let me tell you how. Let me give you some encouragement. So $500 was enough to create that dream that you mentioned. It wasn't enough to pay for everything, but it created that spark that kept you going. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened, right?
And who knows? Because I'm energetic, but I was pretty intense, and so I could have gone a different path.
Right.
But that teacher saw something in me and pushed me into the right path.
Right.
And I'm not as smart as a lot of the guys I grew up with in the hood.
Right.
I just had opportunities, and I love school and I work hard. And so my other friends didn't love school and they work hard, but in not the right stuff.
Right. Right.
And they didn't make it like I did.
That's interesting. So we speak about recidivism in some of our systems and communities, but those people that may have been even incarcerated that are trying to turn their lives around, a lot of them are super intelligent. Like they just applied it wrong. But I think there's so many brilliant people out there that just need a little encouragement.
No, absolutely. And that's why I love working with the South Dallas Employment Project, taking people who are unemployed, underemployed, or unemployable and get them back to work. They're smart. They just had some bad turns in life.
Right.
And so we're doing, I believe in the new IRS, incubate, replicate, and scale. That's how we took everything in Dallas to scale.
Right.
We incubated, made sure it worked, then we replicated it. Same thing's happening with the South Dallas Employment Project. We're working with all these apartment complexes in the hood.
Okay.
To start making sure that we give these people, these adults, an equal life's chance.
Interesting. Now you have a great project as well with a partnership with the Dallas College System. Now the Dallas College System is huge as well, but a lot of your students can go there. And I know in Texas, a lot of them can go for free, if I remember correctly, right?
That's correct. It's a tremendous partnership. Dallas College was visionary. They're the ones under Dr. Joe May that says, we're going to do the Dallas Promise.
Yes.
That if you want to go to college, it's going to do it for free. Then we got legislation passed with a community partner called Commit.
Yes.
That then changed the funding model for all community colleges in Texas. And now, while not all of them can do it for free, they can do it for a very modest price. Dallas College had an advantage because they had a foundation and they invested their money well.
Right.
But now they're teaching people how to do that in other communities. So eventually this can be replicated all over the state.
Now, so you mentioned the Commit Partnership, right? Founded by Todd Williams.
Yes.
Tell us about that vision. I know you're not Todd sitting here, but that partnership seemed interesting. And that might be a good place for people outside of Texas to understand how that happened between Commit and Dallas College and Dallas ISD. Tell us about the framework for how all of that evolved.
Well, first of all, let me tell you how I always take over a new job.
Yes.
I do an entry plan, 100 days, a lot of lists.
Yes.
What do you expect of the superintendent? If you're in my shoes, what would you do first? What 3 things do we need to do to make this the best district in the county or state or whatever?
Right.
Who are the external stakeholders that are critical to our future success? And who are the most respected people on staff?
Right.
That question about external stakeholders.
Yes.
During Hinojosa 1.0,
right.
Todd Williams wasn't on there. Dallas College wasn't on there.
Interesting.
I leave, go to Atlanta, come back. I do the same entry plan. Guess who's at the top of the list? Todd Williams and his wife. They're the number 1 and 2. And Joe May, the new chancellor of the college is at the top.
Right.
So I then started figuring out, why is everybody talking about these people?
Right.
And so commit is a collective impact to try to build a workforce in multiple ways. Of course, college is number one, but you also have to have others. And it was in Joe May, I was at a breakfast with him when I came back, and he goes, Doc, every time I look at early college, that's our most successful. The average 20% of people go to community college graduate in 2 years, but 37% of the kids that go to early college high school graduate in 2 years. And he goes, can we replicate that? And I said, absolutely. And so it was a joint idea.
Interesting.
And then Commit put resources behind it and connections behind it. And so it was organic, but it was also bold. And it was 3 leaders who said, hey, we can do this together. And it's much easier to do it together than do it alone.
Well, I'll tell you this, that those 3 leaders you included, Joe May, Todd Williams, legends in Dallas and in North Texas. And it seems to me that the communities across the country need those kinds of people involved in building this process and this partnership. So it sounds like you mapped this out on a napkin meeting with Joe May.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a 4th person, Bob Mong, who was the president of University of North Texas at Dallas. And he was a former employee or head leader of the Dallas Morning News. And when he took that job, he was our 4th partner in crime. So if you didn't want to go get your bachelor's degree, we had an easy pipeline to do that. And he brought a lot of resources to that initiative.
And what's cool, what that signifies for me is that people across the country, whether you're government, business, a school district, you can make change happen. You don't need to set up a committee to create another committee and spend 20 to 30 years analyzing it. Sometimes you just put the right people at the table and you go make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds like what you did. So you served as superintendent, and then you left and went to Georgia, and then came back for a second stint as superintendent. They needed you back. They needed you back to help make things happen again, right?
Yeah, I was a known commodity. I had grown up in Dallas, had been superintendent in Dallas. And so while there was a lot of new ideas that came in, there was a lot of turmoil, and they knew I could calm things down.
Right.
But what was actually a blessing is I took those ideas and made them work. Yeah. And then we added new ideas. And so it turned out to be a win-win. And I'm very proud to have come back.
So what's the future of education across the country? What do you see as the next driver, the next big thing? Like, how do we continue to take your 140,000 students in Dallas and the rest of our students across the country and give them opportunities?
Well, I think that educators need to think differently. And I think part of that is driven. I was speaking in another room, and I said, necessity is the mother of invention. And so now we have a lot of threats. We have now vouchers, and we have charter schools and private schools and home schools and no school.
Right.
So it's our response. And I love competition. I'm a former coach.
Right.
And so to me is, how do you figure out, and I think we're going to have to figure out that we need to reinvent ourselves.
Right.
And I think that the threats will cause us to do that. And educators want to help people. What we need some help on is how to think differently.
Right.
And I argue the reason that education is the only industry that hasn't changed is that everybody of agency, anybody who's in a leadership position or a position of power, they went to traditional public school.
Right.
Or public or private school, but they went to traditional school.
Right.
And if it was good enough for me, it's going to be good enough for you.
Right.
Not everybody was a plumber.
Correct.
Not everybody was an electrician. Not everybody was a college professor.
Right.
But everybody was a student.
Right.
So they have those biases. And just like we described about the people who go get incarcerated, something turned them in the wrong path.
Right.
The same family, same parents, same kids.
Exactly.
Yeah, but somebody gets off the path. And I think it's because, back to the reason that Dallas College and University of North Texas, Dallas were successful with us, is they customized. Sure. I think we need to customize for our students. And that's the next big thing.
Customize. Okay.
Customize.
How do you make that happen in education?
Well, we figured it out in Dallas, because of the necessity that these students had. And just like these universities figured out how to work with us because we had different needs than Frisco ISD has. We have a different population that we serve.
Right.
And so if you, and some communities, they need very little help, but there are a lot of rural communities that need people to customize for their students.
Right.
And I think once you get customization, then you'll figure out what the needs are. And it's more difficult because it gets a bit expensive.
Right.
But people will pay for what's going to help people's future.
Is technology helping out with the way we educate kids? It's funny. My daughter finished high school a couple of years ago, and I don't think she had any books. It's all on Chrome, a Chromebook now. And so the learning is different. I remember carrying those heavy backpacks when I was in school. And by the time I got to high school, they had us going through a lot of vocational training. So I took the shop class and the home ec class, learned how to cook. And those were useful. But how is technology helping in any way with?
Only if you let it.
Okay.
And let me tell you, we were just talking about now there is a product that on your iPhone, you can have all of your transcripts. You can have all of your certifications. You can have your driver's license. You have everything on a cell phone. It's called blockchain technology.
Right.
Which all of that, we wonder where, you move from place to place, you lose all that stuff.
Right.
But if you got it right here, you're not going to lose this. You see everybody walking around looking at this thing. But a lot of people are resistant. It's a different world. So we get intimidated. And same thing with artificial intelligence.
Right.
I'm a practical kind of guy. And, I went on Copilot and asked, why is school finance so complex? And it spit out 5 reasons in 5 seconds, and I couldn't argue the 5 reasons. Then it had the heading and then subtitle to it.
Interesting.
So, everybody looks at AI as a threat. Right. We look at it as an opportunity. Right. It's just a worldview. Right. Some people have a deficit mentality. Some people have an abundance mentality. I choose to be abundant.
Sure. And so I know we're coming to a close on this, but for the next Mike Hinojosa, superintendent guru, first 100 days, what guidance and coaching would you give them about how to structure that first 100 days so they can build a process to getting things done?
You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should listen more than you talk.
Yes.
And after 100 days, see, most of us who are applying for these kind of jobs, we understand quantitative research. We know the numbers. We studied the audits. We've studied the accountability system. We studied the physical structures. Yes. But what we don't know is the qualitative, the stories that are attached to the numbers. Right. If you listen, I listened and I saw that Todd Williams helped me in 2.0. Don Williams, a different guy, helped me in 1.0.
Right.
And so the same district, same community, right, but things change. And if you're willing to listen, now you got to come back in 100 days and tell people what you heard. Right. And then how you're going to start working on solving the problems. The first 3 questions are all the same questions, just asked 3 different ways so you don't get a false positive about what you should work on.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And so a lot of people that make that mistake, they come in and say, here's my 100 days. This is what I want to do in 100 days. Right. Like it or not.
Right.
Instead of they talk more than they listen.
Right. I joined a company and we completed our first employee engagement survey because we wanted to do the same thing, listen to our employees and see what they're thinking. And then I had a couple of executives essentially try to diminish it and say, well, let's not really utilize it. And my perspective was our employees trusted us. We had a huge turnout on employee engagement. We need to take that information and they need to see us using it. We can't just put it on the shelf now. So it sounds like you did the same. You listen and you find a way to build a strategy around what you learned, not just shelve it and go through just the process of listening for the sake of listening without really using that data to build something great. And it looks like you've built something really good in your 10 years as superintendent.
Well, that process I use at every district, whether I had 2,000 students or whether I had 140,000. The process, command decisions are easy to make and hard to implement.
Right.
Consensus decisions are messy. They take a long time, right, but implementation is much deeper. You can implement those ideas if people help you come up with those ideas.
Exactly.
There's a definition of discussion. Discussion means let me convince you I'm right. Dialogue is it's not your way or my way, but a better way.
Right.
If you have that belief system, then you can get things done.
So our goal in this whole workforce development is to do what you just said and create that better way. So I appreciate what you've done in your role as superintendent across the country in creating that better way for so many families and for so many students. So I'm glad you could take a moment to join us on the program.
Oh, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Dr. Hinojosa, appreciate it. Thank you for joining us on I Build America.
Thank you for listening to the I Build America podcast. Please subscribe, share, and comment, and be sure to join us next time for more insights and inspiring conversations on building a powerful American workforce. I Build America, building workforce success one podcast at a time.